You found the Backup Wrap-Up, your go-to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we're talking about something that makes me want to flip tables upside down. People using Windows shadow copies, or VSS, as their actual backup system. And then ransomware comes along and then deletes those shadow copies using your own built-in Windows tools against you, and suddenly you have nothing. I'm joined again by Dr. Mike Saylor, our intrepid cybersecurity expert, and Prasanna Malaiyandi, of course, and we break down exactly why shadow copies are not a backup, how attackers are pulling off this move, and what you can do to protect yourself. If you've been counting on VSS to save you when things go wrong, this is your episode. Just a quick note about me. I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I've been obsessing about backup, recovery, and now cyber recovery for over 30 years. If that's your bag, then I'm your guy. Well, you're not going to find anybody that cares about it more than me. Ever since 1993, when I had to tell my boss there were no backups, the database that we had just lost. Now I've written 5 books, a blog, and a podcast, and here we turn unappreciated admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Welcome to the Backup Wrap-Up. I'm your host, W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I have with me a guy who couldn't bother to show up on time, Prasanna Malaiyandi. How's it going, Prasanna?
You've heard about Indian Standard Time, right?
I'm not making any comments about anybody's stuff based on where they may or may not descend from.
So I do have an excuse because I had to change into my shirt, which Curtis, I see.
That's a really nice shirt. I should get one of those.
Yeah, I think you have to just find yours is more.
I swear to God, I have turned this house upside down looking for that shirt that I paid good money for, and I cannot find it. Anyway, including yesterday's event where I literally took everything out of my closet. I have no excuse, but maybe it's being used as a cleaning rag somewhere. Anyway, and of course, have our intrepid cybersecurity expert, Dr. Mike Saylor. How's it going, Mike?
It's going well, guys. Thanks for having me.
Have you yet? I have not. Have you seen our book yet?
I have not.
It's killing me. So we're, of course, referring to this book up here on my video, which if you're not watching us on YouTube, feel free. It's a channel by the same name, the Backup Wrap-Up. And Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery, available now at all the places that you buy books. Although,
which is where?
All the places. If you prefer rainforests in South America, or if you prefer buying them directly from O'Reilly or Barnes & Noble. I was in a Barnes & Noble yesterday. Apparently, it's a building in which you can buy books. It's a fascinating idea. Maybe that'll take off. Anyway, so today we're talking about something a little bit up my alley, and I want to just start out. Imagine, if you will, that you have developed a backup. I'm going to make quotes in the air, a backup system, because I don't think this is a backup system. You have developed a backup system around something called shadow copies, which is a feature in Windows that we're going to talk about in a minute. And then you just come in and you've heard that something bad has happened from some sort of cyber attack perspective. And then you find out that, that those previous shadow copies are not available to you. I like that. This reminds me of, for those of you that have been around a minute, this is the ultimate sweep the leg move. That is, of course, a Karate Kid reference. And this also refers back to living off the land, when we talked about living off the land a few episodes ago, where they use your own tools against you. In this case, the tool would be vssadmin, and they just delete this thing upon which you are counting for recovery. This sounds like a bad day. What do you think, Mike?
I agree. Yeah, I think the problems that people have is they become complacent. And I think it's not just with your backups. I think in general with security, but for sure, whoever set up your backup strategy, whether that was you or your grandkid or a volunteer or even someone that's been in IT for a while, shadow copies have been around, and they come with, they come with the batteries. but they're to your point, they're not a legit backup solution.
Yeah. VSS, Volume Shadow Services, aka Shadow Copies, and is a service within Windows where you're able to create a stable, consistent image through which you can view the platform. Let me go back in time. There was a time when VSS did not exist. And when you went to go back up Windows, the problem is you're backing up, when you have a large system, part of the backups are going to be from this point in time, and part of your backups are going to be from that point in time. And if the thing that you're backing up needs what we call referential integrity, meaning integrity between the different points of the system, you're not going to have referential integrity, and you're going to have a bad backup. And there used to be a product, I don't know, Prasanna, do you remember St. Bernard? Is that before your time?
That's before my time.
Okay. Mike, do you remember St. Bernard?
I don't.
Oh, man, this is, okay. By the way, St. Bernard was what you bought something before VSS existed. And for the record, St. Bernard was a San Diego company. And it came from the idea of that St. Bernard's, the image of St. Bernard's with a thing of whiskey around they came to save you. So that's where St. Bernard name came from. And so VSS was this method through which you could create a stable image and do various things with it. So Prasanna, why don't you talk about like the first, what VSS was typically used for?
Yeah, because one of the things that you need to do with a Windows system, or if you're running, say, Microsoft SQL or Exchange, is do your backup. And especially on physical machines, before we had virtualization and everything else, the only way to actually get a stable point from which to do your backup was to use VSS. And so you'd have the backup apps call into, and VSS, it's a framework that Microsoft provides. So you'd call in, you'd say, hey, I want to do a backup of this particular app. Microsoft would then quiesce the application, take a volume snapshot, right? Shadow snapshot. And then it would unquiesce, so then you can continue doing your stuff, right? And then what the backup app would do is it would then read from that shadow snapshot in order to be able to do the actual backups. And so this is what it was useful for. And it was more of like a software snapshot implementation, pre-VMware snapshots. But yes, it was their mechanism to get a consistent point for which you could do your backups from.
And there, like you said, it was a framework, right? So each application that wanted to be supported by VSS, they wrote what was called a VSS writer. And then VSS, and then they just needed to plug into that world. And like you said, a backup app would just say, hey, I'm here to do a backup. It would talk to VSS. VSS would talk to the writers. Everybody would do the right thing that worked for their application. Then we would take the snapshot. It's great for that, right? It is the easiest way to get a backup of SQL Server or Exchange or even Oracle running on top of Windows. Just use the VSS infrastructure. But some people, Mike, have you seen this in the wild where people use VSS like as a backup mechanism? Have you ever actually seen that? You have?
Yeah. Yep.
You're killing me. What?
Why?
No, not that he's killing me, but
no.
Oh, you're saying why? Why would they do that?
Yeah. Why? What was the purpose, Mike? Could you elaborate a little?
I think it's just in the absence of an educated solution. So they tried to understand the manual or did a Google search or saw the word or the idea that it was a backup of some sort. And they just went with that.
Because you could create multiple shadow copies over time, right? And you could hold on to them.
Which is also a problem.
Which is also a problem. It's a problem for multiple reasons, right? Prasanna, I'm pretty sure these are copy on write snapshots, right?
Yes.
Yeah. For those that don't know, there are multiple reasons why using VSS as a backup app are a bad idea. We're going to primarily talk about one of them in the episode. But one of the other ones is if you've got 30 days of VSS snapshots, your performance is in the crapper. Because of the way copy on write snapshots work. I'll see if I can find that. We have an episode where we just delve into copy on write snapshots and what the difference is between them and redirect on write snapshots. But because of the way VSS works underneath, you're going to significantly hurt the performance of your system if you're using it as a backup app.
Now,
But go ahead, Prasanna.
One thing I do want to clarify is my knowledge of VSS is slightly dated. They may have improved things over the years, but
I doubt that they changed fundamental architecture from copy on write to redirect on write. Would you agree?
I would agree.
I think it's highly unlikely. But today, we're talking about the cyber aspects of this. So Mike, why don't you talk? Let me just look at the outline we have here. Mike, you want to just give a brief overview of the concept of living off the land and how that applies here?
Sure. Yeah. Living off the land is a bad guy's strategy of utilizing data, applications, and trust already associated with a compromised host. So if I'm able to get access to any degree to a laptop or a server, what things are already there that I can utilize to further my attack, whether it's escalating my privileges or collecting data or moving from this computer to another computer. Those are the types of living off the land techniques or tactics a bad guy would use. So one of the first things that they will do, and this is the first phase in just about any attack, is reconnaissance. So I've got access to something. What is it, and what do I have access to? What's here? What tools do I have? One of the things that they will look for are shadow copies for a couple of reasons. One is that potentially leverage for extortion or something else. And two, can I collect that data and potentially use that as information to further understand the target? Maybe I've found out that this shadow copy is of QuickBooks. So now there might be some financial information there. Or maybe there's a company name or a project name, something that's going to make the light bulb go off and help me determine if this is a valuable target. And then whatever my next steps might be.
Mike,
Go ahead.
when you're talking about that, I'm actually not sure what's done today, but when an application is reading from a shadow copy, does that get logged in all the other normal processes, or is this sort of something that's hidden away and so the normal mechanisms don't necessarily apply? And so it might be harder to figure out if someone is exfiltrating data.
No, you can actually monitor for not only the store access to where the data is, but you can also monitor for the processes that would interact with the shadow copies, the vssadmin as an example. So yeah, those are all things that you can write detections for. And whether that's like anti-malware on the device or much broader, like network monitoring, cybersecurity monitoring platform.
Yeah, the challenge though, and again, this goes back to the nature of living off the land, is that the tools in question are commonly used by other tools, right? vssadmin and WMIC, which is the Windows management interface on the command line. That's one of the challenges of you can monitor for it, but you might end up getting a lot of false positives. I'm sorry, just looking at here.
Another question while you're looking.
Yeah, go.
Mike, sorry, I've never actually dug into, is it vssadmin or vssadmin, by the way?
2 S's.
Okay.
US.
For vssadmin, I've never dug into it. Can you access control vssadmin? I know you talked about you can monitor it for what files are being accessed, what processes. Can you also lock down who has access to it from a process perspective, or is that not really possible?
That's a good question. I know you have to be a local admin, but I don't know if a scripted like PowerShell could do it remotely, or that's a good question.
Okay.
But likely.
Okay. But yeah, once you have a local admin, then all bets are off, right? At that point.
Yep.
Yeah. So there are ways to use, again, so we're not anti-snapshot. I am definitely anti any kind of backup system that is easily deletable, right? And this is one of them, right? There are ways to use snapshots, and there are ways to use snapshots, perhaps storage array snapshots, for example, that can be done in such a way that they're not deletable. Basically, if you get it to a place, if you get it to a version of the system that is where you have worm turned on, that would be write once, read many, right? There are, again, not anti-snapshot, just this particular snapshot being used as a backup method. Go ahead.
I want to challenge you. Is based on your definition, Curtis, of what we've been talking about for the last 6 years, is that shadow copy even a backup?
It's not.
Okay.
Yeah. So why do you think I think it's not a backup?
It doesn't follow your favorite rule in the world.
It does not follow my favorite rule in the world, which of course would be the 321, which is now the 32110, but basically 3 copies of the data on 2 different media, one of which is offsite. Arguably, the way I understand Peter Krogh, the person who originally coined this term, is the idea he would not think of 3 versions as 3 copies. He would think of 3 actual copies, right? And then he would want, and those need to be on separate pieces of media. The idea there is that you have it on different types of media, so that you have a disk drive and an SSD, or an SSD and a tape, or a disk, whatever. That's what the 2 was meant to, basically different risk profiles. And then the 1 definitely needs to be somewhere else. Off-site would be the term that would typically be used, right? It's a difficult term in the cloud, but you're right. This doesn't meet any of the 3 parts of the definition of the 321 rule. So yeah, I would not consider this a backup. But a snapshot-based system can absolutely do that. Yeah, so again, not anti-snapshot, just anti-using them like this. All right. So Mike, go ahead. What?
But even if you are using a snapshot system, so I know as some of my past employers, they would integrate with the VSS framework to then trigger a hardware-based snapshot because that was better performant.
Yes.
And then they would do their backup off of the hardware-based snapshot.
Yes.
My question, though, is I guess it depends how that snapshot is created, and is it possible to use the same VSS framework to manage those snapshots? Because I'm sure that those backup software has a retention lifecycle that it manages. And so is there a risk that those snapshots could be also deleted if someone gains access to that Windows box?
I don't think the way vssadmin work is it's designed to control third-party snapshots. I think it's only designed to work the other way. I could be wrong. But regardless of how off-host snapshots are created, they need to eventually be somewhere that is worm, right? And if they're not, then I'm not a fan. And again, I don't have a problem with VSS. I think VSS is a great tool. Use it for what it was designed for, which is to give you a stable, consistent image to create a backup from. So let's talk about what people can do to protect against this. And Mike, you've already alluded to this one, is this idea of complaining, have your EDR tools look at things like vssadmin. So let's talk about the first thing here, this idea of give us a little bit more information on the configuring your EDR to trigger on this stuff.
It's a process. And what I mean by that is you've got to train your tools and your people to understand what's normal, so that a normal process like this running in an abnormal fashion would be what you're detecting on. So with any good security tool or security service, security person, there's going to be a lot of getting to know you in the beginning. So, the VSS admin kicking off twice a week, once a day, whatever the case is, those are going to show up as a privileged activity. And so when we're getting to know our clients, we want to be very strict at first so that we can understand all of those things. And then we start to flag those or build an understanding. We build a wiki that says these things happen on this frequency or in this manner, so that going forward, as we detect those things, we can determine if those are normal or not, or normal with some context, like this will happen, but so will these other things. But if any of those normal things happen on their own, that in itself is an anomaly or abnormal. So creating a baseline and getting to know your environment is important. Because
Mike,
again, living off the land would indicate that it's stuff that's already there and that should be okay.
Mike, and I know you've brought this up in previous episodes as well about, okay, you will need to have someone come in, understand the environment, kind of fine tune it for your particular use case. It's not like out of the box, everything is good to go for you. How long does that process normally take? And I'm sure it's going to vary significantly depending on the size of the organization, the number of devices, the applications, all the rest of that. But is this
gonna
like
say it
something that'll
depends.
take 3 years?
It depends.
Yeah.
No, what's interesting about that is identifying the deficiencies or opportunities for improvement actually happens fairly quickly. It's the remediation and the follow-up that tends to take time. As an example, and I'll preface all of this with the adoption of security in most companies has to be aligned with the culture or the compliance requirements. In other words, if I'm a company that doesn't like security, but I want to do business in a regulated environment, I have to adopt security. How we adopt it, how we implement it is a little different and may take some time, but there are some companies out there, some organizations that don't like security or their culture is security averse. We're too friendly to have security type of thing, or it's keeping me from doing my job, so we're not going to do it. There are a lot of, if not every organization has one or two or many very blatant, observable deficiencies, even with just best practice, basic cyber hygiene. One of those is allowing users to be local admins on their computer. Back in the day, that was very prevalent because it needed to be in order to keep the overhead on the already constrained IT support staff you have, let users do some of the basic stuff. I remember when one of the new versions of Windows came out, you had to be a local admin to change your wallpaper, right? That was ridiculous. But it was culturally, people were causing a big stink because they couldn't customize their computers and they were unhappy. And so IT got overburdened with these basic local admin requests. So everybody got local admin. And today we still see that to a large degree. Users have local admin just because there's an exception, because they're an engineer or a designer and their tools require it. And there are better ways of going about that. Sure, give them access to the local account, but don't let them run day to day as a local admin. Run as administrator, not click on the thing and do run as administrator. Don't log in as an administrator. So there's things, the more things you implement, the more burden you're introducing into people's workflows and how they do their job. And so the easy thing to do is just give them local admin. So there's that. But even in those cases, as a cybersecurity practitioner, so whether I'm teaching a tool to tell me what's weird or I'm monitoring an environment for what's weird, if I knew that about an organization, if I knew that somebody was a local admin, I could still, with that understanding, detect anomalies occurring as local admin. There are things that computers do, malware does, bad guys do, that just are not normal user behavior.
Yeah, the challenge, I did a quick look, and it doesn't appear that with vssadmin, that basically anyone with administrator rights can run it, and that I can't say only Steve, right? Only Steve or only administrator, only, the base administrator of account. It doesn't appear that I'm able to restrict it by administrator. And so let's go back to your comment, Mike. I think we can agree that the proper thing is to have an administrator account and not have everybody have admin privileges. But to go back to your earlier, and by the way, this is the same in Unix world, right? Is that you have root, and then you use sudo to run things as root. The same thing here. You have administrator, and then you have Curtis, and Curtis may be an administrator, but doesn't have administrator rights. And so I need to run it as administrator. But to go back to your earlier comment, I couldn't agree more. And it's the same in the backup world. If your culture is not one of cybersecurity, they're just going to fight you the whole time. And I'm sure you've been in situations where the culture is the problem, right? I can think of a company. I can think of this is a great story. There's this company on the East Coast, and I used to work for a big consulting company, and they had this particular company, and this is a company that literally everybody would know this. They actually make things. They're the rarest of all companies. It's an American company who actually makes things. And you have these things in your house, guaranteed. And they were having all these problems with their backups. And I was asked to come in as the big guns and to come in and basically tell them, because they were trying to get things done and the organization was fighting them. And I came in to give a presentation, which basically the title of the presentation was, these are the 10 things that you can do to screw up your backup system. And congratulations, you guys have managed to do every single one of them. Right. But there was a person that had power who was 100% against everything we were trying to do. And when you have a person, whether they're high up in the organization or down low in the organization, if they've got influence and they are actively fighting against you, there's just not much you can do. And I'm sure you've been in that situation, Mike, where you're trying to do something like this, where it's like you shouldn't be using your VSS snapshots as backups, and you really shouldn't. And you should also be monitoring who's running vssadmin. By the way, let me just stop for a second. If you follow the suggestion from the first part of the call, which is don't use vssadmin as a method of doing snapshots, this concern becomes much less important, right? Because the worst you can do with vssadmin, if you're not using it for backup, if you're not using them as a backup method, then the worst thing you could do with vssadmin is create a snapshot, right? Or
delete?
No, but there's no snapshots to delete. If you're not holding on to your snapshots, right, then who's running vssadmin becomes much less important. But okay, let's move on to...
So Mike, I know we talked about, running vssadmin within the Windows box is bad, keeping it long-term is bad. We talked earlier about hardware snapshots are good. Could you talk about, from a cybersecurity perspective, how this kind of might change with virtualization? And if virtualization and VSS lead to less cybersecurity concerns? I know you talked earlier about like auditing and looking for anomalies and that sort of thing. Is that a loaded question? Is that a hard?
No. So on a virtual machine or a virtual host with multiple virtual machines, again, it depends. It depends on what the bad guys were able to compromise. If I compromise the host, then I've got access to all the virtual machines. If all those virtual machines are doing their own snapshots, I now have access to all of those snapshots. Because if I've compromised the host, I'm also privileged on this box across all those virtual machines. So there's that. One of the things I do want to add, though, even though the majority of the VSS process and data require admin privileges, as a normal user on the machine, I can still read those shadow copies. So even if I'm a bad guy and I'm not admin yet, I can still do recon into those shadow copies to see what it is I have access to and potentially exfiltrate that as leverage in an extortion attempt. Because it's already packaged and compressed, right? I don't have to redo that. It's a nice little nugget that I found. But in a virtual environment, just as virtualization makes things more efficient for us, it also makes things more efficient for bad guys. And back to a comment or a thought thread that Curtis was on as far as culture goes, I've seen it both ways. I've seen where the majority of a user base drives culture. So even the leadership team may say, we need security, but then you've got this workforce that says, we will not use security, especially in a service or organization where your user base is out delivering something and they're rebelling against you. You will often cave to them unless it's truly regulatory required. And then I've definitely seen the opposite, where leadership always wants they're going to push it down to everybody else, but they've got the exception. And then everybody sees that, or maybe they become aware of it and their leadership's not doing it. I'm not going to do it. Setting the bad example type of thing.
Yeah, and this is one of those. I've been in environments where I've got people in power that are telling me that RAID is backup, right? We don't need backups. We have RAID, and then they're actively lobbying against you. That's a situation where like you need to just walk away, right? And let them leave.
there,
Go ahead.
there is an example of RAID that is acceptable, but you have to unplug it and put it on a shelf.
That's not. Just saying. That's not what we're talking about here, Mike. You're killing me.
I'm just saying it. I've seen it. They plugged in a storage array. They've done a backup. They unplugged it and put it back on the shelf.
That's not RAID. That's, you know what I'm saying. Dang it. You're trying to get my blood pressure up. It's already.
So this is a little bit depressing of a podcast episode, but is the takeaway that VSS is evil and no one should use VSS?
No, again, just don't use VSS as a backup. That's literally, this episode could have been 2 minutes long. If you're using VSS as a method of backup, not to be confused with using it to make your backup. I don't know. You understand I don't know if you're using it to facilitate whatever actual backups you're doing. In other words, the way where we talked about, where we said, where you're creating a stable, consistent image that you're then creating an actual snapshot of or an actual backup of, I have no problem with VSS. If you're using VSS to create multiple shadow copies and you're storing those on your system, it's a bad idea for multiple reasons. We've talked about performance. Mike talked about using them as a method to get historical information. And it's also bad because all it takes is one black hat with VSS admin rights, and then they just delete them all. So it's just bad. So forget all the cyber stuff we said. Just stop. Just don't do this. Go get a real. Remember, there was I used to have this. I don't know. It's probably bigger in my life than either of yours. But there used to be this Dilbert comic strip that we had, and it was the guy says, there's a guy with suspenders and the beard, and he's, oh, I recognize you, and he says, beard and whatever, and then smug expression on your face. You're a Unix admin. And then the guy flips him a quarter and he says, here's a quarter, kid. Go buy yourself a real computer. That's the way I feel about people that are using their VSS as backups. Okay. I don't know. Do we have any final thoughts on this?
So I think you just said it.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, VSS is often necessary, as the guys talked about earlier. It helps you, quote unquote, lock files so that they can be prepared for a backup. But that backup is some other solution. A lot of backup solutions today do that for you. They put an agent on your machine. It does this function, but in the absence of that capability, you're using some other backup solution. VSS is still often necessary to prepare your data to be backed up. And then the last thing I'll add from a detection perspective is, again, if I knew you were doing backups every night or certain days of the week or once a week, and that's often scheduled, right? It's either a task on the local machine or a scheduled activity across the network. If I knew that from a cybersecurity perspective, and then I saw VSS or even some other privileged backup related account doing things outside that schedule, that anomaly would be what I would respond to.
Absolutely. Yeah. By the way, there was an earlier topic when you're in a new environment and you're trying to configure their EDR tools or XDR tools, can't you just put it in and let it watch for a while to see what normal is?
You can. And during that period, you're going to get a ton of alerts. So there's your false positives.
Okay.
As you're monitoring, I found a new file that's not common across other user bases, or Bob logs in at 2 a.m. I don't know if that's normal yet. During that baselining period, you're teaching those tools or tweaking them or whitelisting them. There's a ton of things that happens during that onboarding period so that you're essentially creating the what's normal baseline.
You can't just say, just watch for a month and don't tell me anything.
You could. It's not going to be.
You don't advise it. Okay. I see what you're saying.
No, I don't advise it.
Okay. But this is why you're the cybersecurity professional and I'm Mr. Backup. All right. This has been fun, somewhat depressing, But yeah, just don't do that. Doctor, it hurts when I do this. Don't do that.
Yeah, I'd like to. That's a new T-shirt idea. Just don't do that.
Yeah.
It's the antitheses of Nike.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for being on the show. Thanks, Prasanna.
It was fun, and I'm glad we got to talk about something that was near and dear to my heart many years ago. So,
and thanks again, Mike. You're a little fuzzy all of a sudden. What happened with your camera there?
It's like an autofocus thing, and it's got its own mind, so I'm not real sure. But if I do a few more of these with you guys, I would expect some logo. I'll wear a logo at some point.
Yeah, you'll get one when I get one. That's what I'm saying. All right. Thanks to our listeners. We're nothing without you. That is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.